65. We're getting reconnected with Marcus Hayes. I saw him in the green room just a second ago, so he's readjusting his shot, and he will join us momentarily here on Birds 365. Looking forward to Marcus's take because yesterday was a tough day to take for the Philadelphia Eagles because they were
I'm with
might
Marcus.
not use the
that
word
tough.
ravaged.
Yeah.
If I say ravaged in free agency, Marcus Hayes, would that be a massive overstatement?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, TJ, I'll put it to you this way. If I told you Alex Singleton, remember him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Alex got a nice little deal from
Yeah,
Jalen.
he got $19 million and TJ got 20. If I told you that 2 years ago, you guys would have flipped your trays over. I mean,
Well, that's what the Eagles do. They develop all-ball linebackers for other teams
to overpay.
They don't give a flying to. They don't give a what about that position, Marcus.
Yeah.
Where are we? I think you heard us going back and forth. So if one team doesn't pay off-ball linebackers at all, and another team pays $100 million for off-ball, where are we? Those are the two extremes. Are the Eagles too harsh with that position, or is a team like the Bears insane?
Well, it depends on how you consider. What do you consider an off-ball linebacker? Because technically, Hassan Reddick is an off-ball linebacker, right?
No, he's an edge rusher. That's one of my problems with off-ball linebackers, middle linebacker, weak side linebacker. So Hassan would be Sam, and he's an edge rusher. So he's different. But that's one of my problems with these labels that people use. So
I think you got to call them linebackers. You're down to two. Most teams are down to two, so they are what they are. They're linebackers. There's no weak, strong, middle. It's your two linebackers.
What do you mean? Well, then the Eagles play four because they play 5-2 and they have two edge rushers.
One of the edge rushers is again. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about this conversation. So my point is, this if you're winning by not paying outside linebackers or typically weak side linebackers, then you should do that. If you're losing and paying outside linebackers or weak side linebackers, then you shouldn't do that.
Right. It comes down to the W's and L's, and we'll see if the Bears get any better next.
Right, but the Bears are historically horrible recently, and the Eagles are historically awesome recently. So these philosophies seem to be diametrically opposed. So you're crazy to pay a weak side linebacker. Any linebacker who's not going to get you sacks isn't worth his money. That's just the way, they don't even really cover anymore. They cover and tackle. They don't cover to make interceptions. But unless you're getting to the quarterback as a blitzer or a fifth lineman or whatever, you're just not worth the money.
All right. So would you say the 49ers blatantly overpaid Fred Warner?
Yeah, not blatantly because he's kind of a unicorn. He's better. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying the Bears and I think the Broncos blatantly overpaid two guys who are just ordinary players.
Yeah. I mean, there's always certain guys. Bobby Wagner for years was tremendous. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Fred Warner's very good. There's always guys at the top of the list, like Christian McCaffrey. The Eagles loved him at running back in the 2017 draft. But, those guys, few and far between. I just think it's interesting, the Eagles, the valuation of their positions. Clearly, we know running back on offense. Off-ball linebackers to them on defense. I mean, they just rotate them. And the Kobe Dean's next up. And then they'll kind of, I don't know if Kazier's coming back, and they'll say, all right, who can we pick out of the refuse bin for $3 million when everything is picked apart? And they think they can get through with that.
Yeah, the $3 million number is interesting because Kazier got 5 last year. And I thought they massively overpaid him. And I was right. He was very good. I know TJ's.
You don't think Kazier White had a solid season?
Is he signed? Is anybody beating his door down? No, he wasn't very good. He did not play well. He was poor. I put him clearly in the second on an elite defense, a defense that was ranked number 2 in the league. Okay, he somehow was in the second tier or second half of the linebacker group last year in the NFL of guys who played regularly. You realize how how many plays were there for him to make and how few he made. With all that talent around him, that talent couldn't elevate him, period. So, I mean, it's more than damning that Kaiser White is unsigned than it is that TJ Edwards got overpaid, probably by, twice what he's worth.
Okay, so you think that they can just plug in Sean Bradley or Davion Taylor or Christian Ellis next year for Kaiser White if he signs today with another team?
I think there are tons of Kaiser Whites out there.
All right.
Yeah. And I think Nakobe Dean is appreciably better than TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards was a guy who got paid playing in the middle of a bunch of really good players because he got to make all the tackles. If anybody got past the line of scrimmage, they usually got hit by the time they got to him, and he was able to make all the tackles. The TJ Edwards who really exists, the real TJ Edwards, the guy that was targeted by the Kansas City Chiefs and was the worst player maybe in the history of Super Bowls in the Super Bowl. I mean, if you look at his tape, he makes no right decisions. He is just, it's almost as if he didn't know how to play football in that game. And I love TJ Edwards. I think he's a great guy. And I was baffled at how, I guess, effective he had been. But Andy Reid said, hey, what I'm going to do is target this guy. And TJ Edwards was always in the wrong place, always at the wrong time. So that said, if you are keying on TJ Edwards in any scheme, if you're going to be the copycat, that's the guy you're targeting. And, I hope for Ryan's sake, teams don't do that because TJ's not going to get better in a new defense with fewer weapons around him.
It's. I think you're being a little bit harsh on TJ, but I like your day one theory. So I want to go down that route, Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm with you. I mean, ultimately, I don't think the Eagles had a bad first day because I knew what was coming. I think they had a good first day from this perspective. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's still out there. James Bradbury's still out there. That kind of tells me their markets aren't quite what they expected them to be. And if you can get those two players back, or even one of the two, most likely CJ, I think that's a positive. How do you see that spin?
Well, I'm not sure that they didn't get what they expected or the offers they expected. I think both James and CJ recognize that this is going to be their shot to get really paid. So they're taking their time. And I think they probably got 3 or 4 pretty good offers. And they both want to stay with the Eagles because the offers came from teams that aren't going to be as good. So I think this is the negotiation time. I think they're sort of figuring out what they can do and where, how much it's going to cost for them to lose, how much they're willing to take to lose, assuming that the Eagles are the best team that's made them an offer. And the Eagles are going to be good next year. I think we agree on that. They may not be the best team in the NFC, but when James is going to be 30, I think next year, or 29. Yeah. And CJ's, this is probably going to be his big deal. He's been hurt, so you got to choose where your legacy is going to be in this contract.
Sorry, go ahead, Marcus, finish.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that nobody blew them away, John, but even if they did, both of them are going to give the Eagles plenty of opportunity to match. And if you look at the rest of the market, they don't really have to worry about, losing because of time. Nobody else is going to get the money they're offered because they might be the best players at their position available in this free agency period.
All right, since we're in the defensive backfield, I got to talk to you about a guy who's not a free agent, but he could shake free at some point, and that would be Darius Slay. Within the last week, came out that the Eagles told Darius, hey, if you want to see if there's a trade out there for you, we give you permission to do so. Slay couldn't get on his podcast fast enough to go, hey, I didn't ask. That was their suggestion to me, not my suggestion to them. He probably has, through his agent, had conversations with other teams. But what happens if he just plays hardball, Marcus, and says, yeah, no, hey, your idea to trade me, I don't want to be traded. And if you guys aren't willing to talk in the neighborhood on an extension that my agent has brought to you, I guess I'll just play the 2023 season under contract that I already have. $26 million cap hit for a cornerback. Talk about going above and beyond what Eagles usually do. What'll happen if they don't get something work out? Will the Eagles cut Darius Slay?
It depends on how they value him and how he values himself. I mean, Darius Slay, my understanding, wants, he's got another year on his contract and he wants a 2-year extension beyond this year. So 3 years total, right? The Eagles want one. They want to lessen, ease the cap hit by a year and essentially guarantee him the next 2 seasons. I don't know that Darius Slay is willing to gamble the second year of guaranteed money. He hasn't been as good here as we thought he was going to be. He's been good, but he hasn't been big play Slay. He just hasn't. The 2 years aggregate there, and there's no reason a cornerback should be getting roasted. 5 times, 6 times last year, John, by the premier receivers, not this past season, but the season before.
Yeah, he had a great first half, really slid in the second half. Obviously, the Jefferson game, he was great, but they let him play really physical. He could have had 3-4 interceptions. He probably could have had 3-4 penalties. But later in the season, yeah.
No, I'm talking about the year before.
Oh, the year before, yeah.
Right.
People started, yeah.
So you've got 2 years. Well, you've got a year and a half of a 2-year stay where he wasn't that guy, right? So does he want to gamble that he's going to be that guy an entire season and approach free agency? Or does he want to have 2 more? And here's the enticement for Darius Slay. And it's sort of, I don't know, intangible. He's respected here. Philly's a big place. The team's going to be good. He loves attention. He posts himself giving banana pudding to his teammates every weekend. His wife likes it here. Okay. And he's going to be paid for 2 years. And who knows, maybe a 3rd year comes from that. But it's a heck of a gamble when you're, I guess he'll be 32, to say no thank you to a second year when you're going to hit free agency at 34, 35 as a cornerback.
Yeah, even I think that's part of the problem, even at 32, and his birthday's on January 1st. So he'll turn 33 January 1st of next year. And let's be honest, I mean, the NFL doesn't like to pay corners when they hit that number. So that's kind of where the Eagles are with Darius Slay. It's a very difficult situation because he is, I think people, that old school mentality of a lockdown corner, I don't think that exists anymore, Marcus. I mean, the game has shifted so much towards the offense. You're going to get beat. Jalen Ramsey gets beat every year. He goes from Jacksonville to the Rams. Now he's with the Dolphins, and everyone says, Jalen Ramsey, he gets beat by Tom Brady in a big spot in the playoffs. It happens to everybody in the modern NFL. But I do think we can sit and look at the Eagles last year and say they had pretty good corner play. And they haven't had that in a long time with Darius Slay and James Bradbury. 2 corners like that. Throw Avonte Maddox in when he's healthy. Where are we going with this defense, Marcus? I mean, if number 2 in the NFL isn't good enough, if 70 sacks isn't good enough, if the DC stinks like so much of the fan base says, what chance does Sean Desai have?
Well, that's the thing. As we get further away from this season, I'm more and more convinced that the Eagles, Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, and maybe even Nick Sirianni, did not think this defense was exceptional. I think they look at this and say, okay, these are the quarterbacks we played. This is the schedule we played. These are the offenses we played. These are the plays we made. And the sort of the trademark of this defense, John, was drop back. The quarterback looks downfield, hitches because you've got pretty good coverage from pretty good defensive backs. And then your massively over-talented defensive line gets home 70 times in 17 games. We're setting a team record at 3rd most ever. If you look at the other if you look at the other teams who are in that, 65 to, or that 55 to 65 sack total, you're thinking, wow, this is probably a better team than this Eagles team. So this Eagles team was kind of a one-trick pony, right? It covered early well, and then it had these monsters who were fresh, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, getting home. So maybe they think that this defense wasn't all that. That's the thing I'm getting from this team, and they think it needs a reset. And maybe they're not. I don't want to say sad to see Jonathan Gannon go because they wanted to pay him head coach money to stay.
Right.
Continuity is important, but I don't think that they think this was a generational defense the way that the stats would make you the way the stats would imply. So losing 7 starters and having a new defensive coordinator, linebackers coach, and defensive backs coach might not be the worst thing, especially when you have real talent coming back. Jordan Davis is a good player. Brandon Graham's a good player. Josh Sweat's a good player. Hassan Reddick's a good player. Nakobe Dean, I think, will be an outstanding player, So, and Avonte Maddox is a good player. So you've got 6 players that you expect, that you have to get, and Milton Williams, I think, is a good player. So you have 7 players. Milton Williams played more snaps or as many snaps this year as Brandon Graham. So you've got 7 players who probably have to start and probably have to play as well or better than last year. But the cupboard isn't bare. If you have a defensive coordinator coming in with at least 2 hires to make, a returning defensive line coach whose defensive line was spectacular last year, and 7 guys who really should be able to play, then you're filling in or, retaining, if you retain Bradbury, if you retain CJ Gardner-Johnson or Slay, any 1 or 2 of the 3, it looks very different. So I wouldn't despair. Also, and I know this is a long answer, but the offense should be even better, right? So the defense shouldn't have to be as good.
Here's my question about the offense. And the Eagles' offense was phenomenal this past year, and they've got most of the key pieces in place to be just as good, if not better, next year. Do we just plug in Beef Jerky into right tackle, believing Isaac Seumalo's gone? And do we know he's going to be good there? We hope he is. We believe that he's going to be the guy who's eventually going to take over for Kelsey at center, but we might do this year-to-year thing for 3 more years. Who the hell knows? Is that a potential question mark on the Eagles on their offensive line with plugging Jergy into a tackle position?
Well, he's got it. He's already got a Jody Mack nickname, Jergy.
Beef Jerky. Yeah.
Beef Jerky. Or is it Yergy? Yeah, it's got a good personality too.
But I gotta say, it's very, very difficult to doubt Jeff Stoutland and Howie Roseman when it comes to the offensive line. Isaac Seumalo is better than any of us thought he was going to be. They made a rugby player into a viable left tackle who still makes a lot of mistakes, but he makes a lot of plays. Landon Dickerson was supposed to be, in rehab perpetually. Instead, he's in the Pro Bowl as a second-round pick. He's clearly a first-round talent, second-round pick. And, Juergens was a luxury pick. He was Jalen Hurts. If you look at the situation, there's a lot of similarities between picking Cam Juergens in the second round on a team that was 9-8 and picking Jalen Hurts, on Doug for Doug Peterson's team. It was, I think there is no position on this team over the last 10 years, given the last 10 years, that I would give them more the benefit of the doubt than offensive line. Every single offensive lineman's gotten better under Jeff Stoutland, and he's made guys into offensive linemen almost overnight. It's really been spectacular. And nobody owes him more than Andre Dillard, who's getting $10 million a year because he can play guard and tackle. And, I will say, as surprised as I was that TJ Edwards got, $20 million over 3 years.
Yeah.
And Javon Hargrave got $40 million guaranteed and $80 million total over 4 years, I think it is, right?
Yeah.
I was not surprised. I was not surprised at all that Andre Dillard got this money.
I was not surprised at all. And call me crazy, Jody knows. Tennessee is going to look back at that and say it's a value because they're going to get a left tackle for $10 million.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a steal.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll track that one. This is one where I'm parting ways with both.
Oh, are you anti Andre?
Yeah. Got a lot of
He's
talent.
the first round draft pick who couldn't get on the field for the Eagles.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a problem if they didn't have the best offensive line in football. Yeah. And I will agree that he probably should be able to play right tackle, but he's become a viable guard and a decent left tackle. And okay, I got you. I'm with you. He should be able to, in a perfect world, he should be a plug and play guy. But he kind of was a plug and play guy at the end. And I don't think tackles, especially left tackles, should be required to be like dependable starters until their third season. Especially a guy with his caveats. He wasn't very strong when he came in, and he was kind of mentally weak. He was kind of a project on a couple of areas. I would say that he's probably progressed at the rate and the level they expected him to. And if he played left tackle for 4 years, we'd be having a different conversation.
Yeah. There were some injuries factored in as well. Remember when the Eagles were set on moving towards Andre Dillard, then he got hurt in training camp, and all of a sudden all these machinations started. We'll see. But I think that's what you're looking for in free agency is value. I think that's a worthy roll of the dice from Tennessee. So I give him credit for that contract. But
and that's pretty good. That's a pretty good franchise. I think they misevaluated the value of AJ Brown. But AJ Brown's replacement is AJ Brown, the first round pick they got, and again, you need some runway. But they've typically been a pretty well run organization who understand football players.
Yeah, they have been. They kind of fell apart last year, and the AJ Brown got John Robinson fired, but they have been a good organization. Marcus, we didn't get a chance to talk to you last week. I know you were on with the Sports Take guys, Rob and D Gunn and Barrett. You had that great piece about the Eagles coaching staff and what went down with Denard Wilson. Anytime, I think one of the strengths of this team last year was the continuity, right? You rarely see in this league no changes with the coaching staff. The Eagles essentially had their whole coaching staff back, and they go on this run. This year, they suffered the attrition, and now when you bring in new guys, there's always political wins, right? There's always people that are upset, maybe go in a different direction. Are we at a dangerous point when it comes to this coaching staff and Nick Sirianni? Because we saw it, you go back to Andy Reid's first staff, unbelievable. But the attrition started, and Andy was so good, it continued on for a while, but eventually lost so many good coaches. We saw it with Doug as well, in more of a sped up fashion. How concerned are you that some of these political things and what went on with Denard Wilson could affect this team, this coaching staff, this franchise?
Concerned? I don't care. I hope it does.
Well, I know you don't care, but concerned for the success of the team. I know we don't care.
More machinations, more Machiavellian. The team is probably going to suffer for it. The adjustment period for being a hired assistant coach, being an assistant coach hired onto a staff to replace somebody else is probably the worst possible scenario, right? You want to come in as part of the platoon that landed and did what they had to do. These guys were, that coaching staff, if you remember, had to go through like COVID protocols, right?
Yeah.
They went through a lot. None of them, you could argue Denard was probably the most qualified guy on the staff to do the job he was hired to do. You can argue Shane Steichen as well, but Shane Steichen, when he was hired, was considered to be a catastrophe as an offensive coordinator in San Diego, or wherever they were. Yeah, it's continuity in the coaching staff. I would, for me, be number one, unless you have a guy who's done a really bad job. And I'm certain, I know that Denard Wilson did an excellent job because of what he was asked to do. He was asked to incorporate in a scheme that doesn't allow cornerbacks to sort of express themselves. He was asked to incorporate James Bradbury and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was switching, making the full-time switch from nickel corner to safety, with Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox, who were established in this defense that you expected to be a little bit more aggressive than they were the first season. And Marcus Epps, God bless him, you know, the TJ Edwards of the secondary, right? And he did a wonderful job. And it was a fractious defensive backs room. You know, they had to talk to C.J. Gardner-Johnson a couple of times about being C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Darius Slay throws Josiah Scott under the bus on Christmas Eve. Mm-hmm. There are lots of things going on in there, and he kept it cool. Now, that's not to say who replaces him can't do the same thing or will face the same challenges. But that didn't make sense to me. If you expected your team to be a contender, why introduce an element of uncertainty? You know what I mean? That you don't need to introduce.
Was a bit of a surprise too, I think, a lot of us. I think I asked you this the last time we had John Marcus. So if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But I've asked it to basically everybody since the season ended. Do you think Kenneth Gainwell can be the lead back for the Philadelphia Eagles this upcoming season? And you can take some wiggle room into what lead back means. Just basically the guy who carries the ball the most. I don't want to put a hard and fast number of touches on it because that can surely vary, but somebody's got to be the lead back, get it more than anybody else this upcoming season for the Eagles. Do you think Kenny Gainwell's good enough to be that guy?
No. I don't think he's big enough, strong enough, tough enough to be that guy. And I don't think he's good enough. I mean, one of the more underrated aspects of Jalen Hurts' abilities is his ability to hurt you with his legs, and you're scared of that. But and I think Kenneth Gainwell profited from that maybe more than anybody else. But when you're the feature back, you know, when you're Miles Sanders, you know, teams are going to key on you more. So if he's the guy getting the ball most, those RPRs aren't going to be quite as effective. You know, those draws aren't going to be quite as effective. You know what I'm saying? I only see him in his career as being, you know, like a third down back.
Change of pace guy, right?
Yeah. That's not a knock on him, but that's just what the NFL kind of is. And if you ask him to play 17 games at that size and take that kind of punishment, you know, it will end badly, I think.
At Ink Stained Wretch, there he is, Marcus Hayes, Inquirer.com. Listen to him here on WIP as well. Marcus, before I let you go, last one from me. You mentioned a little bit about C.J. Gardner-Johnson and the personality. Boy, that's a big personality. You think that helps the Eagles? Because, I mean, New Orleans moved on from him for a reason. We talked about earlier in the conversation about not signing on day one. There could be other points to it. He could have multiple deals, as you said. He wants to think things over. You think in a weird way that personality can help the Eagles keep a player? Because there are certain teams that don't want to bring that into their organization, and the Eagles have enough veteran leadership. The Jason Kelce's of the world, the Brandon Grahams who are back, Jalen Hurts, the old soul playing quarterback, even though he's young. There are certain teams that don't want that. You think it helps the Eagles?
I think it helps them in their quest to keep him, but I'm not sure that keeping him necessarily helps them for that reason. That's the drawback, right? And this assumption that they have the gravitas, the leadership in that locker room to take care of him. And we're talking about a fifth-year player, right?
Yeah.
Why do you need to take care of him?
It's a good point.
Okay, number one. Number two, I think we agree. Certainly, they've lost Javon Hargrave, who was kind of a leader, but they're probably going to lose Fletcher Cox. It was his defense. He was the sheriff. Brandon Graham is not a guy who can go to another guy and say shut up, because Brandon Graham needs to shut up a lot of right. TJ Edwards was very, very, he's very much a grounding element to that defense. So I'm not sure that defense, and Jalen Hurts isn't going to be able to tell CJ Gardner-Johnson to shut up. Jason Kelsey's not going to be able to do it. It's got to be somebody on the defense, probably somebody in the defensive backs room. And if we assume Slay returns, if nobody wants him for the asset and the money that he's going to get if he comes back, if he's your guy that keeps CJ Gardner-Johnson in line, well, that might be an issue as well, because we all know how out there Slay is and how pro Slay is. And it becomes very difficult, again, for a guy who promotes himself and derides other people to tell another guy not to do that. So I don't know that they have the leadership in that locker room right now. We don't know how it's going to look in 2 months, but we don't know that they have that leadership in that locker room right now to handle the CJ Gardner-Johnson experience.
Last one for me, Marcus. We know the Eagles love the trenches. They've always loved the trenches. Everything starts in the trenches, whether it's offense or defense. And the Eagles will lose more free agents. Maybe they actually sign a free agent or two. And then the draft's going to kick in April. And they've got the number 10 pick right now. If Jalen Carter, who most people rank as either the number 1 and number 2 talent coming into this draft, the DT from Georgia, who has off-field issues, was arrested right before the combine, had to get specifically released and quickly hustled to Indianapolis so he could at least get weighed and measured. If his talent falls all the way down to number 10, there's going to be several teams there. You can say, well, why didn't they take him? And you'll know the answer is there are character questions. The Eagles have gone both ways with character guys. Sometimes they buy into them. You just talked about big personality, CJ Gardner-Johnson. They were the team that signed Michael Vick coming out of prison. If Carter falls down to number 10, you think the Eagles, as much as the value they put on the defensive line, would say, we'll not even worry about the character issues?
Well, I think it will depend on how fully or not fully Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis testify for him. They're teammates, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, see, so funny. I sorry to interrupt, Marcus. I'll let you finish your thought. Somebody said that last night to me on the air on WIP, and I said, about the last person I'd want to get information on Mr. Carter. No, they're teammates. Of course, they're going to slant it one way. They're going to look at the outside. They're going to.
No, you don't know. You don't know Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean.
They were also close to the player that passed and the student that passed. Nakobe and Jordan Davis were both close. So
yeah, the Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis are very, very, very mature young men, and I disagree. They would never give a false endorsement to a guy that I'll put it to you this way: if he's a bad guy, they don't want him on their team, even though he was on their team. They are okay. They're different guys. Like, they remind me a lot of Malcolm Jenkins. You could see Malcolm Jenkins go, some Ohio State guy, you can see Malcolm Jenkins saying, no, we don't want that guy. And I can see Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis saying that about a former teammate that they don't want. I'm not saying they don't want him. And I haven't heard a whole lot bad about him right. Outside of this issue. And Georgia's had a pretty good run. Georgia and Alabama have a pretty good run with character guys over the last, 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah.
There's going to be a bad apple, but everybody knows who the bad apple. The other thing is, when a guy comes out of a really good program with that reputation, because a lot of teams are able to, a lot of programs can hide that. When a guy comes out of a program like that with a bad reputation, that's usually right. I don't know. It's like the shield, right? The brand of Alabama, the brand of Georgia is too precious to the players to risk sullying it. So I think you get a lot of truth coming out of there. I may be wrong, but I will say this. It's been my job for 32 years, 33 years to be around these young men, these young football players. And the vibe I get from Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean is that professionalism is first. So I think that they would give you an honest report one way or another, about anybody coming from a program that they're familiar with.
Yeah, we got 7 more weeks before the draft, so there will be a lot more investigation done
right.
on Mr. Carter between now and then.
Where Big Dom makes his money. That's
right.
where it comes down to. Yeah, and the big
Dom,
title.
Does he do his research while tied to the coach's hip? I didn't know they actually shook him out to do a little research.
Oh no, he spends when we're not around them, he's gone all the time. Springtime, he's constantly on the road. He's checking everybody. It's astounding how much he moves.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't notice it because you only see him on Sundays, and he's always right off the hip of the coach. So you think he's there 24/7. Not the case. Marcus, we appreciate whenever you jump in with us. You did a great job again today. Thank you very much. We'll certainly be getting you on a little further into free agency and absolutely before the draft. Thanks for doing it today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Marcus Hayes, Philadelphia Inquirer at Inkstained Wretch on Twitter. Love that handle. And you can catch him on WIP as well. All right, Johnny Mac coming back. We still got plenty to break down. Next hour, we'll have our bud Chris Franklin. Usual Mr. Monday. He's a Tuesday dude today. We're trying to stick with Eagle guys as free agency continues. Tough day for the Eagles, Jesse. Not a crushing day because we saw a bunch of it coming. But you can't spin it as a good day either when you lose TJ Edwards and Marcus Epps. We'll continue our evaluation of the Eagles in free agency next.